Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway, is outside her new office building, the White House. Good morning, Kellyanne.
Good morning, John.
Donald Trump had a strong reception at his inauguration, and then yesterday there were those marches. He has credited himself with hearing the people, and that's why he was elected. So what is he hearing when he sees those protesters marching?
We heard a lot of what we heard on the campaign trail, John. I mean, I think they missed a tremendous opportunity yesterday to really engage America's women and men on the issues that President Obama's legacy has left behind. Why do we have 16 million women living in poverty? Why do we have millions of women and their children without access to health care, even though we have had the Affordable Care Act for 7 years now? Why are so many people struggling to find well-paying jobs in this economy? And why do they feel unsafe in their own communities? And that's something that this president really wants to help solve. I mean, you had profanity-laced, vulgar comments coming from celebrities. Donald Trump, in his inaugural address, talked about the forgotten man and forgotten woman, and now these forgotten celebrities came to Washington to deliver, really negative messages.
We've been hearing the beeping of a moving van in the background there. Everybody knows this is real. But here's my question, Kellyanne. He's now the president of the whole country, so I understand his views about the Obama administration, but he's the guy in the big office now. He's the president. Does he look at those opponents the way FDR did? I wear their scorn as a badge of honor? Or does he do the same way Nixon did when he went down on the mall and met with the Vietnam protesters, talked to those young kids? What does he hear? What does he hear from the people who don't support him?
He hears and sees a country that is divided. Donald Trump didn't divide the country, but as president, he has a great opportunity to help heal and unify it. And John, President Trump took a couple really big steps forward in that regard in his inaugural address. It was uplifting, it was unifying. He did reach across and try to engage people who did not vote for him, who maybe disagree with him politically and otherwise, to really come together. And he actually earlier in the week met with Martin Luther King Jr.'s son, Martin Luther King III, in New York, where they had an incredibly constructive and honest conversation about unifying and healing the country. If you listen to President Trump in his inaugural address, he talked about unifying and being aspirational, uplifting, and then the very next day you have people being very negative about him. But he's reached across. He's going to be a president for all Americans.
Let me ask you what he's actually done. Obviously, there's some dispute about about whether there was an uplifting speech, but I want to ask you about what he's actually done that affects real Americans. He took an executive action on the Affordable Care Act. If for the 20 million or so who get their insurance that way, what's that going to mean to them?
Well, for the 20 million who rely upon the Affordable Care Act in some form, they will not be without coverage during this transition time. But, John, let's talk about the millions who have already lost their health care, lost their insurance plans, lost their doctors. That devastation has been terrible for many Americans and their families. And what he wants to do in replacing Obamacare with a more patient-centric free market solution is to make sure these people have coverage. Lots of folks got caught in that trap and that gap, and he wants to make sure that through his plan you can buy insurance across state lines, you have a health savings accounts, you block grant Medicaid to the states. Let
me ask you this, Kellyanne. Well, first things. One, the number of health insurance, according to Gallup, only 11% is uninsured in America. That's the lowest in the last 8 years. Is that the standard for Donald Trump's health reforms, that anybody anywhere who loses their health insurance, that will be seen as a failure of his health insurance plan? And I still don't know, if I'm on the Affordable Care Act, what that executive order, the action he's now taken, what should they think?
Well, they should think that it's a great big step toward replacing Obamacare with a plan that works for more Americans, that truly makes it affordable and accessible. There are other Americans baked in your statistic there, John, who can't use their health care because their premiums have skyrocketed so dramatically in places like Arizona by 113%, in Pennsylvania 53%. And so people who actually count as having health care actually can't access it because they can't afford the premiums and the deductibles. So we want to make it easier for them. We hear from small business owners and families every single day that this is a crushing burden for them.
Let me ask you, yesterday, the White House press secretary went out and gave a press conference. Why didn't he talk about this, which, as you point out, is such an important issue? Millions of Americans hanging to find out what their health care system is going to be like. Isn't that more important than the question of crowd size, which is what Sean Spicer was talking about?
Well, our press secretary, Sean Spicer, will be addressing Americans on any number of issues, including the ones I've just said on your show, John. Yesterday, it's just disappointing to get into this argument about crowd control. Nielsen says 31 million people witnessed Donald Trump's inauguration on the television. We know many other millions of Americans are watching events like this on different screens on their telephones and their computers. And we know there was a prediction of rain, a big rain out that probably deterred many people from coming. But all that said, there were hundreds of thousands of people here.
In terms of,
we all saw it. I think, I'm into the things that we can quantify, and that does go to everything from the 2,600 counties he won in 31 to 50 states, and the millions who are in need that he's going to help.
But that's in the past. I guess he's now doing things that affect real people, their real lives. No more rhetoric. This is real stuff. So why on a day when you could talk about when you can talk about a thing that the new president has done, the White House chooses to spend its political capital and its time on something that's quite petty relative to the big changes he's going to make in American health care?
I think it's a symbol for how we're covered and treated by many in the press, John, and that's unfortunate. Look what happened the day before. The very day before, we invited the press in to cover President Obama signing executive orders in the Oval Office. And what happened immediately? A false report, I'm sorry, this is very important, a false report was issued by the press pooler, and it went out to 3,000 and some outlets, 3,000 stories, and it was false that there was the removal of Martin Luther King Jr.'s bust in the Oval. That is just false. It was sitting right there. I was in the room.
Let me ask you a quick question.
You can't have false reports like that and expect us to not wonder why we're covered and treated so differently and unfairly.
But it just seems that it's a question of proportion. The president himself went to the CIA and thanked all the people there, said he was behind them 1,000%, but then went off and talked about crowd size. Aren't there more important things to talk about at the CIA for the new president of a nation of 320 million people?
Well, he did talk about important things, and frankly, him going to the CIA at all represents how serious he is about having a very productive and constructive relationship with our intelligence community. We had over 1,000 requests for folks to attend that. We can only accommodate 300 or 400. He will be back. John, why did President Trump plan on going to the CIA in the first place? He wanted to witness the swearing in of his new CIA director, Mike Pompeo, top of his class at West Point and Harvard. He's going to be a great CIA director, but why couldn't he witness his swearing in yesterday? Oh, because the Democratic Senate won't confirm him. President Trump has nominated 21 of 21 cabinet positions. Only two were confirmed by the time he took office. We can't have a government that way. We need bipartisanship up on Capitol Hill, and the Democrats allowing him to get his nominees through so that we can start the peaceful transition of power.
All right, Democrats say Mike Pompeo is likely to be confirmed next week. Kellyanne Conway, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, John.